So they went into the ark. All those that entered, male and female, the Lord shut him in. And so I think that is significant too. God said, come on in. They went in, and then the Lord shut them in. Flood was upon the earth for 40 days. The waters increased, lifted up the ark. It rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed, greatly increased on the earth. The ark moved about the surface of the waters. The waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth. All the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. But they probably, as I said, weren't that high at that time. Actually, if the earth were completely flat, if we didn't have these great canyons in the oceans, if the earth was totally flat, it'd be covered by 6,000 feet of water. So the mountains didn't have to be that high. God just lifted up a landmass on the first day.
Join our Discord https://discord.com/invite/ca9v2x6bsp.
But he didn't have to lift it that high. It was only after the flood that we had these huge. And if you'll study the evidence, the Andes, the Himalayas, the High Sierras even, geologically they all testify of not having existed very long. In fact, in the Andes, high up into the Andes, we have the terraces of the farms that go far beyond the timberline. In fact, they go right on up into the glacier ice. And it's impossible that the Indians could have farmed that area if it were at that altitude that it is today. And so there is evidence that that thing has been thrust up in the last 5,000 years or so. And very strong evidence. And again, Earth's in Upheaval, an interesting book that will lead you down that fascinating path of possibilities. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward. That is probably 15 cubits above the highest point of the land mass at that time. The mountains were covered. And all of the flesh died that moved on the earth. Birds and cattle, beasts, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. All that was on the dry land died, the dry land creatures. He also destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing, bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. The waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. That is, the earth was covered with water for the 150 days. During this time now, of course, you've got all of this water on the earth. Now, how do you get rid of the water? So again, you see, it took the upthrust of these mountains and all to get rid of the water off the face of the earth. The water is still here. It didn't just evaporate. It doesn't just run off like it does now into the ocean. We may have a localized flood situation. And it may get, water everywhere, but it ultimately runs off and is into the ocean. Or again, it evaporates and is carried by the clouds over the landmass, and we get the water cycle. But here, with all of this extra water, everything being covered, there had to be then these upthrust of mountains, and so the geological changes were taking place during the 150 days, and probably even longer. Then God remembered Noah. Now, that isn't to say that God suddenly remembered, hey, I got a guy floating around down there, you know. But that activity of God, direct activity of God with him began again. You see, one of the problems that we have with God is that we don't have divine terms by which to describe him. Now, there are probably terms that when we get to heaven we'll discover and we'll understand, but we couldn't even understand them now because they are terms that define the aspects of an infinite God. So you see, in our describing God, we are limited to our vocabularies. We have to describe him with words of our own vocabularies, and thus we use human terms to describe the characteristics of an infinite God, because that's all we have to deal with. So when God begins his activity with Noah once again, the word God remembered Noah, that is, he began again to directly intervene and guide him in his activities at this point. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep, the windows of heaven were also stopped. Rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters receded continually from the earth. And at the end of 150 days, the waters decreased, so that the ark came to a rest on the 7th month and the 17th day of the month on the mountains of Ararat. The ark rested. Now, it is interesting to me that God would take care to give us the very days that the things happen. And God doesn't just capriciously throw in dates. There no doubt is a significance to these dates. In the 600th year of Noah's life, the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month. So the Bible gives us the very day, probably beginning with creation, that the flood began. Now, God gives to us the very day, and notice this is a period of 5 months, but we are also told that it's 150 days. It's now the 17th day of the 7th month. It began on the 17th day of the 2nd month, now on the 17th day of the 7th month. 5 months, but it's 150 days, and so it is a year that is calculated on a 360-day year. 5 months times 30, you get your 150 days, so you've got a 360-day year by which the calculations are made. And it is interesting that in the Old Testament, up until the time of Daniel, the years are still calculated to the Babylonian calendar, which at the time of Daniel was still a 360-day year calendar. And so here we have 5 months, 150 days, so you have your 360-day year calendar. Now, the interesting thing, the 7th month, the 17th day of the month. The exact day. Do you know what day it was that Jesus rose from the dead? It was on the 17th day of the 7th month. Month of April, Jewish calendar, the 7th month. It begins in October. And on the 17th day, you see, the Passover takes place on the 14th day. Jesus was 3 days and 3 nights in the earth, and so it was on the 17th day of the 7th month that Jesus rose from the dead. It was on that day that the ark rested. Interesting, and we pointed out before, Noah's name means rest. So rested in the ark. on the 17th day of the 7th month. The waters decreased, and it rested the sea, and the ark rested in the 7th month, 17th day, on the mountains of Ararat. Now, there have been a lot of stories as to the location of Mount Ararat. A lot of different countries have laid claim to having Ararat within the country. However, it would seem that the location in Armenia is probably the correct location. And there have been reported sightings of the ark on Mount Ararat, which of course is now in Turkey, in as much as they conquered Armenia. And there have been reported sightings of the ark throughout history. Marco Polo even records in his records of the ark being a sort of curiosity piece and visited many times by the people living in the area of Mount Ararat. And so there are those who believe that the ark still exists there today. There was a book written by a French explorer, Navarro, who wrote the book, The Ark, I Touched It, and he brought down certain pieces of wood from the top of Ararat, which he said he broke off from the ark. There have been, of late, every summer expeditions that have gone to Turkey attempting again to locate the ark. Jim Irwin, who was one of the astronauts who went to the moon, has put together an expedition in the last 2 summers of group of men. Heritage College in San Diego has sent expeditions for the last 3 or 4 years searching for the ark. Men with scientific equipment and gear hoping to find the ark and to bring back the actual evidence that the ark does still exist. And the descriptions of it, of course, are quite fascinating. But as yet, there is no real solid confirmation that the ark does indeed still exist, encased in ice, about the the Ararat is 17,000 feet. They say it's about the 15,000 foot level. Now, if they do discover the ark, it of course would be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in the history of the world. Therefore, it is worth looking for. And it would be extremely fascinating. But would it make you more of a believer in God if they found that thing up there? Would that cement your faith? Wow, I guess no. If they don't believe Jesus said the record of Moses, they wouldn't believe it even if a man came back from the dead. Your faith in God is a matter of choice. And there's sufficient evidence already to cause us to believe in God. And so the waters decreased until the 10th month. The 10th month, the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. That is probably some of the lower hills. So it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. He sent out a raven which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. He also sent out from himself a dove to see if the waters had abated from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot. She returned into the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand, took her in, drew her into the ark to himself. And he waited for another 7 days, sent the dove out again, and the dove came back with the freshly plucked olive leaf. And so we see the picture of the dove with the olive leaf, and it's become a symbol of peace. And Noah knew that the waters had abated from the earth. So he waited another 7 days, sent out the dove again. This time it did not return. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark, looked out, And indeed, the surface of the ground was dried on it. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. So 360 plus the extra 10 days. It happened on the 17th day. This is the 27th day. God said to Noah, go out of the ark, you and your wife, your son's wives with you. Bring out every living thing. So 371 days or so, they're in the ark, and now they come out, and God commands them be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. So Noah went out, and every beast and creeping thing, according to their species, went out of the ark. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird, and offered a burnt offering on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. So, interestingly, the first thing that Noah did was to build an altar unto the Lord and offer a sacrifice. It was a burnt offering sacrifice, which is the sacrifice of consecration. Now, this all happened, you remember, long before the Mosaic law, the Levitical law. Before God instituted the various types of sacrifices, or codified the various types of sacrifices, before God had ever codified the clean and unclean animals. Yet there was something that there was already that awareness. Moses just put it down and God codified it through Moses, but it was something that already pre-existed before Moses. The idea of a burnt offering sacrifice, the sacrifice of consecration unto God, the idea of the clean animals, which were defined and described under the Mosaic law, but already known and understood long before the Mosaic law. Now, Noah, having descended from Adam, had a sinful nature. God recognizes and acknowledges now the sinful nature of man. But even though man does have the sinful nature, God is going to make a way of redemption for sinful man. Recognizing that man's nature is sinful, that he has this tendency towards evil. There is within the very nature of man that tendency towards evil, that sinful nature. Yet God declared that he will not destroy every living thing, again, as he had done. That is, by the waters of a flood, God is going, the judgment that has come during the time of Jesus Christ will not be a total judgment and extermination of all that are upon the earth. There is a indication in the scripture that the judgment that will take place just prior to the return of Jesus will destroy 2/3 of the earth's inhabitants. So he'll bring 1/3 through. So it won't be a total extermination as it was in Noah's day of those outside of the ark. Even there will be that possibility that a person could survive through the Great Tribulation period. It's not a possibility that I would personally want to gamble on. So God made his covenant then with Noah. God promised him, while the earth remains, there will be seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. Quite possible that they didn't have winter and summer prior to the flood. That there was just a uniform temperature around the earth annually. I mean, it was just, beautiful tropical climate everywhere all year long. But now the earth tilted at the 23 1/3 degrees, giving us longer and shorter exposures to the direct rays of the sun. As we make our orbit around the sun tilted, it gives us the summer and winter, and it, of course, also caused the polar ice caps because of the long period without the sun at the North Pole during our winter months and at the South Pole during our summer months, formed these huge ice caps on the poles, which account for the winds and the storms and the violent movement of the air currents, which of course makes much of the earth uninhabitable now. The vast areas of the North Arctic Circle areas that are for the most part uninhabitable by man. These began to exist only after the flood. So this is one of those subtle indications that more than just the breaking up of the fountains of the deep, more than just the emptying of the canopy of water, there were probably other great catastrophes that were associated with this time of the flood of Noah, creating the elongated year, 365 days now, and creating the various seasons of winter and summer, cold and heat, seedtime and harvest, day and night. Now, this was God's covenant with Noah. God promised this was going to be. And up to the present day, God has kept his promise. I told you it was going to get dark. And I had every confidence when I told you this morning it was going to get dark this evening. Because I have God's promise. It's going to be day and night. And I can promise you it's going to get light in the morning. And I have no qualms about turning out to be a false promise. Prophet, I mean, if in the morning it stays dark and the sun doesn't come up and the thing just stays like it is now, tomorrow morning, then you can say, hey, he's a false prophet. And God broke his promise. You can say, wow, God broke his promise. No? As long as the earth remains. Now, the earth isn't going to remain forever. Heaven and earth is going to pass away, Jesus said. But as long as the earth does remain, we're going to have our seasons. We're going to have our orbit around the sun. We're going to have our diurnal processes. We're going to have the day and night. We're going to have seed time and harvest. We're going to have heat and cold. Those things are going to exist as long as the earth remains. Now, a lot of interesting speculation can be entered into at this point. I believe that when Jesus comes again to establish his kingdom, that in the Great Tribulation period, when a lot of the cataclysmic judgments of God are taking place, they are twofold. They are one, to judge the people upon the earth, but they are also to bring the earth back into its condition that existed prior to the flood and the judgment of the flood. So that I believe that in the kingdom age, you'll have conditions existing much as they did before the flood, where again you'll have ideal climates, universal here on the earth. In other words, I do believe that the Arctic pole areas, again, will be beautiful, gorgeous jungles, tropical jungles, and beautiful areas to explore. And I believe that the earth will be probably corrected in its present tilt, and God will probably just put it again straight so that we get the same exposure to the sun from both poles all the time. The polar caps will melt. Of course, there will be geographical and geological changes. A lot of the islands are going to disappear during the great judgment of God that is coming upon the earth. Their mountains will disappear. There will be new ocean floors, and I think God's going to sort of restore things back to the way they were before the flood, where the earth will just provide an ideal environment for man. You won't have to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
But everywhere you go will just be beautiful, lush paradise where the waterfalls. And remember, the Bible talks about the deserts will break forth and blossom like a rose, and there will be streams in the deserts, rivers in dry places. And God speaks of a whole process that is going to take change during the kingdom age when Jesus is reigning upon the earth. And so it'll be an earth that is restored to the glory and the beauty of Eden, the glory and the beauty of the earth prior to its destruction by the flood during this kingdom age. If you're interested in a scientific kind of a treatment of the flood, I highly recommend the book by Henry Morris and John Whitcomb, The Genesis Flood. It's a scientific treatment of this whole cataclysm that took place, and I think that you would find that you that have that certain bent or ilk, I would suggest it. I would also suggest to you, though they do not come from a biblical base, the two books of Immanuel Velikovsky, Worlds in Collisions and Earth in Upheaval, where he presents just a tremendous amount of evidence that support a universal flood. And as I say, he does not come from a biblical base, but his research is just outstanding. May the Lord be with you, and may the hand of God rest upon your life. May you find your place of rest in Jesus Christ, our refuge, our coming soon. May the Lord deal with you concerning your own. And cause us not to just think of God in a take it or leave it kind of a mode, but that of complete and full surrender and commitment unto Him. Days are short, while the earth remains, but the earth isn't going to remain much longer. Thus may we, as Peter exhorts, begin to live and look towards the things of the Spirit, knowing that the material earth is to be destroyed. May we place our values in the things of the Spirit, our investments in the things of the Spirit, that they might be lasting and survive. May God just really direct your life in a very special way this week as you walk in fellowship with Him. Through the grace of Jesus Christ, may God see you as righteous before Him on the earth. In Jesus' name.
That's what he is. turning as sharp as you can, not going out and then back. Yeah. Do you want to see? Do you want to see? Pause it.
Whoa.
Why?
Hi.
Oh.
What you doing?
I'm bored.
You bored? I saw your text. Honey, you look like you're not bored, you're tired. Like you're about to go to bed. Wanna go to sleep? Alright, I'm gonna go back to bed. I'm gonna go back to bed. Because you're going to bed. Yeah, you are. Looks like you're going to sleep. Raise up if you're going to stay up. If you want to go to bed, go to bed. Seems like you're tired. Debbie, if you're tired, I understand.
Where's my glasses?